The bride screamed as the dock creaked violently beneath her, champagne glasses tipping over just as the entire wedding setup began drifting into the middle of Lake Meredith with her, the groom, and all 200 guests still on it. 30 minutes earlier, I'd warned Karen, the self-proclaimed queen of Lake Meredith's HOA, that my dock wasn't a free-for-all wedding venue. Now, watching from my porch with a fresh, ice-cold lemonade and my trusty binoculars, I couldn't help but mutter the three most satisfying words in the English language. I told you so. That Saturday morning had started with the deceptive tranquility Lake Meredith often wore like a mask. I'd stepped onto my porch just after sunrise, coffee mug warming my hands, the scent of damp earth and pine needles sharp in the cool air. As one of the few black homeowners in this predominantly white, affluent enclave, I'd learned that tranquility here was often conditional, easily disrupted by those who felt my presence was an anomaly. The lake was a mirror of still gray, fog swirling like ghosts among the trees on the far shore. The only sounds were the distant chatter of awakening birds and the low thrum of an early fisherman's boat engine miles away. My plan was simple: feed the mallards that congregated near my shoreline, enjoy the rare silence, and maybe finally get around to oiling a few weathered boards on the dock I'd painstakingly built myself. Then, the jarring shriek of a power drill ripped through the morning calm like a physical blow. I turned, nearly fumbling my mug. Disbelief washed over me, quickly followed by a familiar, weary anger. There, on my dock, the structure representing years of saving and weekends of hard labor, a massive white canopy tent was halfway erected. Beneath it, people in pastel dresses bustled about, arranging rows of white folding chairs. Two beefy guys in matching polo shirts wrestled with a portable speaker system, cables snaking across the planks. And orchestrating the entire invasion, clipboard clutched like a royal scepter, was Karen. Karen, president of the Lake Meredith Homeowners Association. A woman whose aggressively highlighted blonde hair seemed perpetually sculpted into a helmet of suburban authority. Her oversized sunglasses probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment, and her favorite phrase, always delivered with a tight, insincere smile, was "as per HOA policy," a phrase often weaponized, particularly when directed at my property. She embodied the smiling, passive-aggressive face of the neighborhood's underlying racial bias. The subtle exclusions, the constant low-grade scrutiny, the implicit questioning of whether I, Hank Jackson, truly belonged among the manicured lawns and pontoon boats. For 3 years, I'd navigated her reign. I dodged her unsolicited friendly property inspections, ignored her passive-aggressive newsletters highlighting violations that seemed only to apply to my address, lawn slightly too high, recycling bin visible for an extra hour, and endured the overly loud greetings at community events that felt more like surveillance than welcome. I'd learned the coded language, where maintaining community standards often felt synonymous with maintaining a certain demographic homogeneity. But this blatant commandeering of my private property? This was a new level of audacious entitlement, rooted in the unspoken assumption that my space, my boundaries, were somehow less inviolable, more available, than those of my white neighbors. This wasn't just trespassing. It was a statement. Adrenaline surged, fueled by righteous indignation. I stormed down the grassy slope towards the water, weaving around floral arrangements and stacks of linen napkins. My shadow fell across a silver champagne bucket, just as Karen spotted me approaching the dock entrance. "Oh, Hank," she chirped, her voice hitting that falsely sweet, slightly patronizing pitch she reserved exclusively for me. It was the tone one might use for a slow child or a potentially unpredictable animal. "Isn't this just fabulous? Don't you worry your head. We'll have everything cleaned up spick and span afterward. It's only for a few hours. It's my niece Amelia's special day, you know." Such a romantic setting. I planted myself directly in front of her, forcing her to tilt her head back slightly. My voice was low, steady, cutting through her fabricated cheer. Karen, this is not community property. This is my dock. My private property. You do not have permission to be here, let alone host a wedding. You need to dismantle all of this and leave. Immediately. She waved a flimsy piece of paper, avoiding direct eye contact. Oh, it's perfectly fine, Hank. I mentioned potentially utilizing a scenic lakeside spot at the last HOA briefing, and the consensus was overwhelmingly positive for community beautification efforts. Your dock simply offers the most picturesque backdrop. Everyone agrees. It really elevates the entire shoreline aesthetic. The implication hung thick and heavy in the air. Your property is only valuable when we deem it useful for our purposes, she added with a dismissive flick of her wrist. It's practically community frontage anyway. It wasn't. My deed clearly outlined property lines extending well into the water, meticulously marked on county plats she'd undoubtedly seen during her previous inspections of my boundaries. The paper she fluttered wasn't a permit or an agreement. It was, predictably, a frilly wedding invitation. This is not HOA land, Karen. I repeated, the words clipped. This is mine. You are trespassing. Setting up an event here without my explicit, written consent is illegal. Her smile tightened, the plastic veneer cracking just enough to reveal the hard certainty beneath. Hank, please don't be difficult, she sighed, as if I were the one creating the problem. Think of the community. Think how lovely this is. The photos will be divine. Amelia will cherish these memories forever. The subtext screamed, your objection is petty and antisocial compared to our important social event. I folded the invitation she still hadn't actually offered me and attempted to hand it back. She pivoted away before my hand completed the motion, already snapping orders at a nervous-looking catering assistant arranging canapes near my favorite fishing chair. Ensure those cucumber sandwiches are kept shaded. And where is the string quartet? The catering staff, the setup crew, even the early arriving guests decked out in their wedding finery. They all mirrored Karen's behavior. Eyes slid past me. Conversations continued as if I were invisible, a mere fixture on the landscape they were temporarily borrowing. Guests streamed onto the dock, heels clicking rhythmically on my wood planks, selfie sticks aloft, chattering excitedly. Not a single person hesitated, questioned the situation, or even offered a nod of acknowledgement to me, the black man whose property they were occupying with such casual assurance. The slow burn of resentment I'd carried for 3 years. Resentment born from countless microaggressions, condescending tones, and the constant, exhausting need to justify my own presence, ignited into a cold, hard resolve. They saw my dock, my space, as theirs for the taking because they fundamentally saw me as someone whose rights were negotiable, whose boundaries were suggestions. Someone who wouldn't, or perhaps couldn't, push back effectively against their collective, privileged assumption. Fine. I turned, my back straight, and walked calmly up the path towards my house. I didn't shout. I didn't threaten. I had stated my position clearly. I had warned Karen directly. I had asserted my property rights. She had chosen, with the full weight of her perceived authority and entitlement, to ignore me completely. That was her decision. The consequences would be hers as well. What Karen, in her boundless arrogance, either didn't know or didn't care enough to consider, was a specific feature of my dock's construction. During extensive repairs the previous winter to address ice damage to the support pilings, I had engineered a temporary quick-release system. It involved reinforced locking pins connected to a lever mechanism housed discreetly in my boathouse. It was designed purely for maintenance, allowing me to detach sections for easier underwater work without the exorbitant cost of hiring a specialized barge. It required specific knowledge and a deliberate action to engage. It took me less than 10 minutes inside the shadowy boathouse, shielded from view. A turn of a wrench, a firm pull on a heavy, well-oiled lever. A faint, satisfying clunk echoed in the enclosed space. Nothing dramatic. Nothing visible from the outside. Back on my porch, I settled comfortably into my sturdy wooden rocking chair. I poured myself a tall glass of lemonade, the condensation already beating on the outside. The ice cubes chimed musically against the glass. I picked up my binoculars, adjusting the focus. Showtime! The ceremony was just beginning. The groom stood stiffly at the makeshift altar, nervously wiping his palms on his trousers. Bridesmaids in matching peach dresses giggled and whispered behind their bouquets. Karen stood near the generator, humming discreetly at the back, beaming with proprietary pride, occasionally glancing down at her phone, likely checking the social media, but she imagined this charming event was generating. The officiant began intoning solemn words about love, commitment, and shared journeys. Then a low, protracted groan emanated from beneath the dock structure. It was a sound easily mistaken for settling wood or the wake of a distant boat, but I recognized it instantly. It was the sound of stressed metal pins beginning to yield. The entire dock gave a slight shudder, a tremor that ran through the planks. Then slowly, almost gracefully, a sliver of dark water appeared between the end of the dock and the grassy shoreline path. It widened fractionally. The dock was no longer tethered. It began a gentle, almost imperceptible drift backward, powered by the lake's subtle current. For a few seconds, nobody noticed. The guests were focused on the couple, the officiant's voice droning on. But then the flower girl, a tiny thing in a poofy dress, lost her balance with a small stumble. She pointed, her eyes wide with confusion, at the widening gap of water. "Look!" A collective gasp swept through the assembled crowd. Heads turned. Murmurs grew into panic shouts. Champagne glasses on a nearby table rattled, then cascaded onto the white tablecloth in a fizzy wave. Someone shrieked. A man in a tailored suit yelled, "Get a rope! Somebody get a rope!" A futile command, as the dock was already several feet from shore. The DJ's expensive setup, perched precariously near the edge, tilted, balanced for a heart-stopping second, then slid into the lake with a loud, ignominious curse splash. The bride gasped, dropping her pristine white bouquet. She clutched instinctively at her veil as the gentle lake breeze, no longer blocked by the shoreline trees, caught it like a sail. The groom, bless his bewildered heart, attempted a semblance of calm, patting the bride's arm reassuringly, but his eyes darted frantically towards the growing expanse of water. He looked positively green. Karen, her face finally registering the full scope of the unfolding catastrophe, let out a strangled cry. "What is happening? This wasn't supposed to. I demand! Lawsuit!" Her voice cracked with a mixture of fury and dawning horror. Amidst the rising chaos, a small toddler, momentarily unsupervised, made a dive for a drifting pink balloon and nearly slid under a catering table towards the water's edge before being yanked back by a shrieking relative. Through it all, the dock, my dock, burdened with Karen's hubris, her blatant disregard for my rights, the bewildered wedding party, and 200 increasingly frantic guests floated serenely, steadily, inevitably towards a vast, open center of Lake Meredith. My phone buzzed insistently on the small table beside my rocking chair. Caller ID, Sheriff Thompson. Tom was a good guy, one of the few officials in town who consistently treated me as an equal, not a suspect or a token. "Hank," his voice came through the line, tight with suppressed laughter. "Tell me my eyes are deceiving me. Please tell me I am not currently observing your entire dock structure, complete with a full wedding ensemble, executing what appears to be an unscheduled aquatic migration across Lake Meredith." "Good afternoon, Sheriff," I replied calmly, taking a long, satisfying sip of my ice-cold lemonade. The tartness was perfect. "Your eyes are not deceiving you. That's precisely what you're watching." There was a pause then. "Did you, Hank, For the love of God, did you detach your own dock? I trained my binoculars on Karen again. She had somehow procured a megaphone from the wreckage of the DJ station and was now attempting to bark orders, flailing her arms like a conductor leading an orchestra of pure pandemonium. Didn't lay a hand on it after they blew off my direct warning to leave, Tom, I said evenly. Gave Karen explicit notice it was private property, that I'd been doing repairs and they were trespassing. Trespassing tends to have unforeseen consequences around here, I guess. The dock seems to have developed a mind of its own this afternoon. Tom exploded into genuine unrestrained laughter, the sound crackling over the phone line. Oh, sweet mercy. Okay, Hank. Just stay put. Don't go anywhere. I have to dispatch a Marine unit. Officially. Try. He choked back another laugh. Try not to enjoy the view too much. He clicked off, still audibly chuckling. Down on the water, Karen's megaphone pronouncements were proving utterly ineffective. Everyone please remain calm, she screeched, her voice distorted and shrill against the rising tide of panic. This is merely a temporary buoyancy adjustment. Standard procedure. Nobody was buying it. Panic had fully taken root and was blooming wildly. From the Hendersons' property next door, Old Man Henderson usually complained about everything, but clearly couldn't resist this real-life drama. A bright yellow, two-person paddleboat launched into the water. It was manned by two unfortunate souls in ill-fitting suits. Clearly HOA volunteers Karen had likely strong-armed into service. They paddled with frantic inefficiency, managing mostly to spin in tight, dizzying circles like confused water beetles. One of them, attempting a particularly vigorous stroke, leaned too far starboard, lost his balance entirely, and tumbled into the lake with a surprised yelp and a significant splash. His companion screamed, dropped his paddle, and somehow managed to make the boat spin even faster in the opposite direction. A smattering of ironic cheers went up from someone still stranded on the drifting dock, evidently not a fan of the fallen volunteer. Meanwhile, the bride, her expensive white gown now visibly damp and clinging unhappily, had collapsed onto one of the folding chairs, sobbing hysterically into her ruined veil. Her mother, attempting a dramatic comforting gesture, promptly fainted dead away, landing with surprising precision face-first into a large silver platter heaped with rapidly warming shrimp cocktail. It was, in a twisted way, magnificent. It was pure, unadulterated chaos, born entirely from one woman's racially tinged arrogance and refusal to respect boundaries. And, thanks to modern technology, it was playing out live for the world to see. Unbeknownst to Karen, a quick-thinking teenager among the guests, likely bored by the ceremony even before it went adrift, had started a live broadcast on social media mere moments after the dock began its voyage. My phone started buzzing incessantly with notifications as friends and family from across the country shared links, screenshots, and increasingly hilarious commentary. Hashtag floating wedding fail, hashtag Karen set sail, hashtag dock of doom, hashtag Titanic 2 electric boogaloo. The hashtags proliferated instantly. People were screen recording, reposting, adding mocking soundtracks. The internet, in its swift, merciless judgment, was savoring every second of Karen's very public, very wet downfall. I carefully lowered my binoculars, wiping a stray tear of mirth from my eye. I leaned back further in my rocking chair, the gentle motion soothing. The sun had climbed higher, casting dazzling, splintered reflections across the lake's surface. The frantic chirping of disturbed birds had subsided, replaced by their usual melodic calls. The shouts and splashes from the drifting dock provided a distant, almost ambient background noise. Peace, the hard-won, fragile peace of my lakeside existence, rudely interrupted by entitled prejudice, was slowly, satisfyingly, returning to my small corner of the world. But a knot of certainty remained in my gut. This spectacular humiliation wouldn't be the end of it. Karen wasn't the type to learn from mistakes, especially when she undoubtedly believed I was the one at fault. She wouldn't see this as the consequence of her actions, her trespassing, her dismissal of my rights. No, she would see it as a deliberate, malicious act perpetrated by me, the problematic black neighbor, aimed solely at ruining her perfect day and undermining her authority. She'd be back. Oh yes, she'd be back, armed with lawyers, HOA bylaws twisted to her purpose, and a righteous, racist fury. But I had plans for that too. My recently upgraded security system, installed after one too many anonymous complaints about the precise height of my hedges, had captured everything. Crystal clear video and audio documented her arrival, her crew setting up, our entire confrontation, her explicit dismissal of my warnings, her entitled assertion of control over my property. I had proof. Round 1 was decisively mine. The subsequent rounds, the inevitable fight against Karen's backlash, and the ingrained biases she represented, were yet to come. But for now, savoring my lemonade and the distant spectacle, I felt unexpectedly prepared. Ready even,